Welcome to this week's edition of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. I have my good friend and colleague Judah Friedman of The World According to Ben Stein. Here he is, the wise sage. I want to talk first about the assassination, planned assassination, another one on Donald Trump this week. It's clear that the hatred that was spewed by everyone, including Oprah Winfrey, if you can believe that, at the Democratic National Convention, whipped up enough violence to cause some lunatic to go out and try to kill Trump again. I have said, and in fact, there's another podcast that's up on our website at freedomwatchusa.org, or you can find it at Truth Social, you can find it at YouTube, that the Democrats are directly responsible for this new attempted assassination. It's absolutely disgusting. It's abhorrent, and I intend to hold them accountable for it. It was a well-orchestrated Democratic National Convention. It was all based on the hatred of Trump and of joy. And somehow the Democrats claim that they now wrap themselves in the flag and they're patriotic. They're not patriotic. They're disciples of the devil. They want to destroy this country. I'll be plain and simple and straight up on that. And they also want to destroy human life. They have no respect for it. That the equivalent of a taco truck run by Planned Parenthood, which of course was founded by Margaret Sanger. Abortion was intended basically as genocide of the black people, to eliminate black babies in the South in particular. Then, of course, grew beyond that. Now they just dismember them and sell the parts as well as kill them. That they were actually offering free abortions and free vasectomies. I mean, low class, disgusting, beyond belief, and sanctioned by the Democrats. And then, of course, we had to see that clown Tim Walz. Not only is he a communist, I mean, the guy's essentially a pervert. He acts like a pervert. He looks like a pervert. He walks like a pervert. And in fact, this is a guy who sanctions not just abortion in late term, but also kids getting vasectomies themselves, or whatever you want to call it, sex change operations behind the backs of parents. What a bunch of people. Disgusting. And then, of course, we'll get into JFK Jr.'s, Bobby Kennedy Jr.'s endorsement of Donald Trump and his statements about the Democratic Party, which pretty much dovetail with what I'm saying in a different context. He views them as corrupt, he views them as dishonest, and in fact, now he's reacted and he's thrown his support to Donald Trump. So with that being said, let me turn it over to my good friend and colleague, Judah Friedman. That's my thoughts, but watching this week, it's extremely dangerous because whatever you say about Kamala Harris, she has learned how to deliver a good speech. She's attractive. She's appealing. She's like the devil. She will draw you in along with her devilish colleagues and comrades. And I do firmly believe, and I'm sure that Judah probably disagrees with me on this, I believe as of today, there's probably over 90% chance that she will be elected president based upon the ignorance of many people who are voters, not our supporters, not your friends and colleagues, but the fact that Americans tend to be taken in very quickly. They're naive. They vote on the basis of appearance. And the bottom line is this: whether you like President Trump or not, the fact is she's very charismatic. She's learned to be charismatic. And this is danger. The devil is charismatic as well. Go ahead, Judah.
Which part do you want me to disagree with you?
You can disagree with all of it. That's
I
fine.
no, I agree. The thing that's the disgusting and ironic thing about the vasectomy and the pop-up vasectomy abortion uh, ban was that it was done in the inner city of Chicago. So Margaret Sanger, looking down, looking above, uh, is smiling because that was her whole plan, was to annihilate the black race by setting up Planned Parenthood. Now, and here's the problem, that Republicans didn't have enough guts or know to realize there was something optically. What they did would be like if the first people to get the vaccine were blacks. That's essentially what they did at the DNC with that vasectomy ban and that abortion ban with Planned Parenthood, who was set up again with eugenics, Margaret Sanger, and I encourage people to look up Margaret Sanger, and that it was in the middle in the inner city of Chicago, Larry. You can't make up in life. I don't think this was I don't, 25 million people may have watched it. 5 million people more were looking to watch Beyonce last night. I think Trump wins in a landslide, especially after Bobby Kennedy Jr.'s endorsement today.
Well, you may be right, but I'm talking as of today.
I'm saying as of today. I'm looking at the markets.
Okay.
I'm
Well,
looking at the polls.
I hope that you're right, Judah,
Can I
but
give you
it's
some
going to
numbers?
require work. And let me just add one thing,
Mm.
is that I don't tell people who to vote for, but I want Kamala Harris off the ballot in Florida. I've sued her there personally as a Florida voter and citizen to get her off the ballot because she participated in the fraud in 2020. She was a co-conspirator to tell people that Biden was capable mentally and physically of being president, and he wasn't. He hasn't been president at all. We now know that he basically stayed in his bedroom, God knows doing what, maybe playing with himself for all we know. I don't actually, he's not capable of that either. And notes were coming in and notes were coming out, and we don't know who was writing the notes. It was probably Jill Biden at the time. She's been the president. This selfish, you know what, who was the one that was crying on the first night because she's not going to be able to have a clothes wardrobe and travel around the world, and be Miss Big Shot, first lady. These people are disgusting to the core, but we need to rise up and do something now, because Bobby Kennedy is one thing. That's a good story, but you'll see how it's twisted by the leftist media. Notwithstanding dumping bears in Central Park. Frankly, I don't have a problem with dumping the bear in Central Park.
No, compared to what the other
It's a
things,
nothing shithole anyway. Excuse the French.
but
Okay.
compared to other Kennedy things, that is not a drop in the bucket of what they've amassed in insanity and murder and rape in their illustrious and Nazism in their family history.
Well, I may disagree with you on this one too. I think that John F. Kennedy, our president, was a great president. He made mistakes, obviously,
He was
but
over 2 years.
he lifted the American people up much like Reagan did, and he was inspirational, and he had something behind him. He made a mistake, inching into Vietnam. Johnson made it worse. Obviously, he should not have kowtowed to Castro and the Russians, Soviets at the time, with regard to removing missiles from Turkey. And that's why the CIA had him killed. In all likelihood, they thought he was soft on communism, but I think he was a great president for the time.
That was his uncle, though, and I wasn't around. I'm referring, though, Larry, I'm referring to the when you put the full picture of the Kennedy of the Kennedys together. It's not a pretty picture that America loves to paint. But look what they're doing with Kamala right now. It's the same thing, right?
Oh, it is. It is.
Sorry?
It is. And I'll tell you something. I like Robert F. Kennedy. I might have voted for him if he had continued to run. I'm not telling people who to vote for, but I like the fact that he has the courage of his convictions. I don't agree with a lot of the things he says. I do agree with him with regard to vaccines, however, and that's a story that needs to be told. And according to what he said today, Trump is on board. I think Trump's going to make him the head of the Department of Health and Human Services. I hope he does, frankly. I think that was the quid pro quo.
That's actually not, though, just so you know, that's not the position. That's that's not the position. If you wanted him to do something, it would be in charge of the FDA. That would be the position that he would want more than anything, because it's the FDA and the NIH and all those organizations. Hey, I'd love to see him as the head of the CIA. Okay. That would be a dream come true, Larry. Think about all the things we'd find out.
Well, remember, the head of Health and Human Services, that sits on top of the FDA. The FDA is a sub agency to it. It is. I used to have my office at Judicial Watch right across.
No, I know. I just didn't think they had that much power. But it's neither here nor there. I'm very glad. Do I have a second to get into the numbers? Why I'm so?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Okay, so Hillary at this point in history in 2016 was favored by 9.2 in the state of Pennsylvania. 9.2 in the state of Pennsylvania. Biden, and we know she lost. Biden is favored about close to 6 points in the state of Pennsylvania. Trump is up 0.2 in the state of Pennsylvania. So when you look at those numbers, there's a huge and remember, Biden only supposedly won Pennsylvania by 0.3%, maybe 0.2%. It's a huge thing of numbers. We're missing 7 to 8% of a voting block. And when you put Bobby Kennedy in, and Bobby Kennedy is at 6%, 5%, let's say, or 4% even, that's 6.2 million voters. Even if 5.8 million stay home and 400,000 vote, that's the election. And I just want to put that in perspective. That's a huge number.
Well, you may be right. But see, I'm talking about momentum. I'm talking about how the leftist press, I hate when they use liberal. Even the Republicans are using liberal. It's leftist. Liberal, by the way, in Europe means conservative. In Canada, it means conservative. We're talking about the left, is that they will do whatever they can to elect her. And
there's no doubt.
You cannot overemphasize the fact, as despicable and as dishonest, frankly, and as intellectually disgusting as she is, that she is extremely charismatic. And she does know how to deliver a speech. So it will be interesting to see how she interacts with Trump at the debate. She's not the same person as she was 4 years ago in the primary. She's obviously practiced. And I believe that somebody like Nancy Pelosi came to her probably months ago and said, get ready. And we're going to remove Biden at the right time and the right place. Because that Democratic National Convention was so well orchestrated. It was like a puzzle that was fitting together with the same themes. Everyone pounding, pounding, pounding Trump. And of course, giving the false impression that somehow the Democrat Party now is pro-American rather than what we know it to be. We know it to be anti-American. We know it to be borderline communist and certainly socialist. We know it to be anti-Semitic. We know it to be completely unconcerned about the border, about crime, and anything else. I mean, the Democratic Party is pure evil. And that's not to exonerate the Republican Party either with its problems. Believe me, it's become a money-raising racketeering enterprise. But this is a real threat to this country. And I believe, being religious like I am, and I have, everybody knows I'm Messianic, Jewish Christian, whatever you want to call me, or evangelical for that matter. I'm basically evangelical in that context. I believe that God, looking at what's going on right now, may be in the process of destroying our civilization to start all over again, as he has many other times, frankly, and destroying the temple, in Jerusalem. So this is where I think we are right now, and I think we're headed for potential destruction. So Americans who care better rise up, and I hope they join us at Freedom Watch. We're doing our part, however it may be, to try to arrest this. But she is a real danger. She is the devil in disguise. And the people behind her are a group, frankly, comprised of, ultra leftists and perverts. I want to introduce to our viewers and listeners a friend of mine as well, Charles Butler, a conservative, a very talented radio talk show host. So I want to introduce you, Charles, to Judah Friedman, also my friend and colleague, and also very talented and the host of The World According to Ben Stein. And I want you to pick up where we left off. We were talking about the Democratic National Convention, my opinion that Kamala Harris is very charismatic, but so is the devil, for that matter, and that she's a real danger to this country. And the American people are generally asleep at the switch. They vote based on appearance. They don't inform themselves sufficiently. That's how we got Joe Biden in the first place, notwithstanding others that preceded him. And that we really need to do something about this peacefully and legally, because I think there's a significant chance, more than that she's elected the next president of the United States. So take it away, my good friend, and then Judah will chime in, and then I'll chime in.
Well, I know Kamala Harris from California, And she was dating a fraternity brother of mine, Willie Brown, who was 60 at the time, and she was 30. She's 29. He gave her 2 jobs on boards. She made 6 figures on each board. So, and she was good looking. She looked like a Bollywood movie star. And you start monitoring the rise of Kamala Harris. This is a woman who recently bragged about putting Black men in jail for smoking dope and possession of marijuana and smoking marijuana. And she said, I remember being in college listening to Snoop Doggy Dogg and smoking reefer. Well, she lied, because Snoop Doggy Dogg he didn't publish his first record until in the 90s, and she graduated from college like in 86 or something, from Howard in 86. So anyway, she lied, but no big deal. But she's very, how can I say this, charming. She's very charismatic. You know, Barack Obama called her the most beautiful state attorney general in the country at one time when he's president.
Compared to what, Michelle?
You know, compared to other secretaries of other attorney generals around the country.
All right.
But anyway, the thing is, she's very, like I said, she's good looking, smart girl. She plays her cards well. She dated another friend of mine, Montel Williams. I don't know if you guys remember him. He's a talk show host.
Of course. Yeah.
And you know, she's she was a climber. You look up and she's running for Barbara Boxer's seat, and she's a senator. You know, when you follow her record, she's way left. She's left of Bernie Sanders. So, you know, people who want to forget about all of that, they're crazy. I don't believe one word that comes out of her mouth. She says she's not gonna. She supports fracking. She doesn't support fracking. How is this woman going to stand up to Putin? How's she going to stand up to President Xi? These guys are going to laugh their butt off having this woman to talk to. See, here in America, we try to treat women as equals. The reality is, men out here don't respect women, and they keep women in what we used to call their place. Now, you got too many what I call they're like what was the term they were using about these men at the Democratic convention who didn't have any testosterone? I call them emasculated, because we have a whole bunch of American men today who are males, but they're not very manly, and and they need to be punched in the face. And that's why people like Donald Trump, because he's a man's man. And it's really hard, even with some of my friends, it's very hard for them to process that we don't want a punk or a sissy or a guy like Barack Obama as president. Or we want somebody who's rough and tumble and gets in there and mixes it up and throws some punches. I remember this one story. I'm digressing for 1 second. This guy from Texas, black congressman, tells about Donald Trump. He said they're having a meeting with the Taliban leader, and Donald Trump tells the Taliban leader, "I'm going to withdraw from Afghanistan, but I'm going to do it on a conditional basis." He said, "If one American loses their life, I'm going to kill you." So the translator turns to Donald Trump. He says, "What?" He says, tell him what I said." And so the translator told the Taliban leader what he said, and then Donald Trump reached into his pocket, pulled out a photo of the guy's home, handed it to him, and walked out of the room. That's the president. So it's like Nixon. Nixon was one of the last real presidents we had. He's a real president. He used his power.
Now we have to have you on The World According to Ben Stein. So there you are, because Ben will be your biggest fan.
Is that right? I love Nixon.
Ben wrote for Nixon.
Yeah, well, Nixon did a great job. He's a great president, but the media
one caveat, Charles, he put in wage price controls, which is exactly what.
Well, he tried it, but
Can I say something?
He backed off. So what?
Can I have because I have a little knowledge of this situation.
I like Nixon too.
It was actually Ben's father Herbert Stein, who was a famed economist, that came up with this idea for the price control. You have to remember we had the oil embargoes going on because Nixon decided to save Israel. So they tried it for 3 months and it was an absolute bust and they got rid of it.
Right.
So that's exactly how that
I like
was
Nixon too,
created.
but it drove my family's pork business.
No, no, I understand. I'm just giving you the origins of that. It came directly from Ben's father. That was Herbert Stein's plan.
I think Nixon
And
is one of the better presidents in modern history, frankly.
can I say something on Charles's? I think Charles is 100% correct. He's 100% correct. There's Donald Trump. The reason RFK got his endorsement, or RFK gave him his endorsement, was Donald Trump did something, and he did the same thing to Robert Kraft. When Robert Kraft's wife died, for the first 11 months in Judaism, after you say the mourner's prayer, every week Donald Trump would call Bob Kraft and say, "How are you, Bob?" And Robert Kraft afterwards said, Trump didn't ask him to say this. None of his best friends did that. Trump's not the type of guy that comes out and brags about that. But when he said on Truth Social that Bobby Kennedy needs Secret Service protection, he wasn't saying that to gain brownie points. He was saying that because he actually doesn't want to see another Kennedy get assassinated, and he doesn't walk around bragging about it. There's something about our culture that has shifted where everybody needs to get acknowledgement, like a pat on the back. Hey, you did. That's not Trump. And part of us, I know, wishes that he would sort of compliment himself a little. I know he compliment, but on those
Well,
on the personal stuff, Charles.
let me,
You know what I mean?
Let me throw this out there. Al Sharpton told me to my face that Donald Trump gave him the seed money for National Action Network and funded him $1 million in support for years. Jesse Jackson, if you look at the #1 supporter on the FEC, the federal election, whatever they call it, where they keep control of it, Donald Trump is the largest contributor to Jesse Jackson's presidential campaign. Donald Trump also funded Jesse Jackson's Wall Street project. He rented the office building for and paid salaries. And then, these guys come out and they act like well, Trump, he's a menace. He's the worst thing that could happen to America. Shut up.
Every rap song. How many rap songs was he in? And you look at what he has done for and they'll come out and say it, but it's really important for us to talk about it. You look at a lot of former black athletes. He's very in the Steinbrenner vein. And it could be black athletes or white athletes that have fallen on hard times. Trump and Steinbrenner, who he looked up to greatly, were always those guys that were there for them. You look at what he did for Dwight Good and Darryl Strawberry. The list goes on. And Trump the same way with Tyson.
He and Mike Tyson.
The same way with a ton of them.
Yeah.
Herschel Walker.
Yeah.
All these people. Trump doesn't see color. A lot of people say that. I see color. I'm sure Charles sees color. I know, Larry, I'm sure you see color. I really don't believe Donald Trump sees color. He sees green. And that's when you really think, but he also is a very caring person. This is a person that has given his plane for people to go to hospitals. There's so many stories, and you judge a man. And Charles, I'm so glad you brought up Nixon because I'm very well acquainted with one of his children. And you judge a person by how his children are. And when you look at the two presidents that I look up to the most are Nixon and Trump, they've raised the best children. And that's how you judge a person, is how well their children have and how respectful their children are and their grandchildren. And so I'm really glad you brought that up, Charles. Really nice to meet you.
You too.
Well, let's talk about Kamala Harris, not just her personality, but her views. So you guys take it away. But what I found frightening with the Democratic National Committee, it's not convention. It's not so much that they didn't get specific. It's the fact that they obviously were in a very manipulative way trying to draw in new voters, Americans who really don't know much about anything. And I'm looking on TV and I'm seeing some of the commercials that are being produced by the Republicans, and I'm looking at the ones that she's having produced, and hers are much more effective. The Republicans seem to miss the mark. But she's going right for the jugular. Of course, they're lies. They're total lies. But the thing that scares me the most is that the Republican Party is just not capable, I don't think, of countering this. It's not enough that you can turn on Fox News, and except for the fact that the hosts during the Democratic National Committee were kissing the behinds of the Democrats so they could get interviews. I mean, I almost wanted to throw up watching it. Martha McCullum, Bret Baier, the rest of them were basically just getting down and, excuse the French again, having oral sex with some of these people. Of course, they were partying, so they were in a good mood, Jana Perino in particular. But the fact that the Republicans are unable to counter this and get the message across, they cannot be afraid of going for the jugular with her. They've got to basically just, you know, figuratively speaking, cut her head off at this point. But it's very hard to do that to a black woman, you know, in terms
Charles,
of.
can I ask you a question?
Go ahead and take that away, guys.
Charles, I want to ask you a question. So I'm very big into, I'm very big into data and numbers. And I keep on trying to, there's this narrative out there for some reason that Trump's losing. And when you look at this day in history with Real Clear Politics, Clinton was up by 9, Biden was up by 6, Harris supposedly is up by 1.5. Trump is still up in all the swing states. And all of a sudden, there have been there have been a birth of 1,000 different polling companies around the world, what people don't realize is that 538 really kicked out Rasmussen, the most accurate pollster of the last 2 elections. But I wanted to ask you this question. I think there's 4 different voters right now that are not being honest. There's the shy Trump voter that we know that that's 100% true because nobody wants to be called a racist. Then you have the reverse of that, Charles, where it's, will you vote for Harris? And nobody wants to say no because they don't want to be called a racist. Then you have, I believe there are quite a few women out there who don't want to be isolated. So they'll and really don't like Trump, but they'll hold their nose. And then I believe there's the black male that are vastly under or not being sampled. And I really do, you know, Larry's more on the other side of this. I'm looking at a landslide victory for Trump when I look at real numbers, Charles.
Well,
I agree.
Black male, he understands the black male pretty well. And you've been blackmailed on a number of occasions.
But Charles, that's my
Well, you know, I think you're right. The only polls that I trust, Rasmussen sometimes, but IBD tip, I've found has been the most accurate polling out there, because when everybody else had Trump out of it, they didn't. They had Trump winning in 2016. And I think that the numbers were right in 2020. I think the election was stolen in 2020.
Yeah.
I think that as statisticians have pointed out, the swing in votes in a lot of these states it's just improbable that they could happen.
Impossible.
That they would get that many votes.
Impossible.
And so when they get to court, you have these judges in court who are typically Democrat, liberal, and they have a God complex. And if they aren't Democrat or have any affiliation, they still have a God complex. And they hate for people to appear strong or to appear capable. They hate those type of people. I've run into judges like that all the time, and I'm not a lawyer. And I've hired a few mouthpieces like Larry to represent me in court because they get into the bar. But I had to tell them what to say. They were, and a few of them were like cowards, and I had to really, the judge is anyway. Right now, I'm dealing with a similar situation where I'm giving a letter of support to a guy who took a judge to the Judicial Inquiry Board that I had taken to the board 3 years ago for the same thing, and that's disrespecting the court. And she had a God complex, not understanding that I'd punch her right in the face. I'd do 60 days in jail. What a thrill.
You wouldn't do any day. Well, you're a conservative. Let's be honest, Charles. You do 30 years in
Country
jail.
judge, you'll do a lot more than 60 days.
Yeah, you're a black conservative. You're 30 years in jail right now.
So,
Okay.
yeah, but I've been a conservative since 1972, man. I passed out literature on University of Michigan's campus in 72 for Dick Nixon. And people said, well, why are you supporting Nixon? I said, why is Jim Brown, the football player, supporting Nixon? James Brown, the entertainer, Sammy Davis Jr., Bill Russell, Wilt Chamberlain. Why are they all supporting Nixon? People go, like, dude. Yeah, well, my daddy's a Democrat. So what? You're at the University of Michigan. You're more educated than they are. You should know better than they do. Anyway, so I'm not a nouveau Democrat or Republican or conservative. I've been conservative all my life, and it's only based on facts. It's only based on common sense. It's only based on loving this country and having people out of my business. I don't want the government telling me what to, like, you have to wear your seatbelt. You have to put your name down on a what do you call it? When you get on the plane, I need to know where you go. I need to know where your money is in the bank. Didn't Biden say that he wanted to record every transaction over $600? Who the hell does he think he is? You know, this is my money. And then you have people out here who are so stupid. They go, well, you know, what's wrong? What do you mean what's wrong with that? I don't need the government in my business. You know, when I file my taxes, that's enough. It's more than enough, because I would never, and this is the other thing I like about a guy like Trump. Trump said every time Zelensky comes here, he leaves here with $50 billion. That ain't gonna happen on my watch. Like when he was running for president, he said, look, we're in a bunch of bad situations here. We're in a bunch of bad trade deals. Nobody, and I mean nobody, not even Trump, tells about how he eliminated NAFTA, which was one of the worst things that ever happened to the America and the U.S. worker. It devastated families. It devastated people's dreams because your good manufacturing job went to peasants. And then you have these idiots in these think tanks. Well, the American workers have to learn to compete on a global level. We can't compete with peasants. Peasants make $1, $2 a day. In China, they make $2 or $3 a day. How do we compete with that?
Kamala should basically keep America mediocre again. And
she's going to destroy America.
Yeah. But I wonder, you know, Larry, sorry for chiming in. I really like Charles.
Okay, guys, take it away.
But I want to, you know, Charles, we both of us belong to groups that were the only two groups essentially that never vote our own interest. The only self-interest groups that never vote our own interest.
True.
And both of us are probably in the same boat when we meet people. People automatically assume we're like a buzzkill. When they meet us, they're like, "Oh, you must be Democrats," and like, I mean, like I am the stereotype. I mean, look at me. Let's be real. And they're like, "You're a conservative."
Basically saying you're a real Jew.
Yeah. And the other night, Shapiro, when I loved it, and I know you're probably not. I love when Trump says the Jewish governor of Pennsylvania. I love when he does that.
Black job.
And I have no problem with that as a Jew. And this was the Nixon thing with Billy Graham on those tapes when he was supposedly being anti-Semitic. There is no Israel without Richard Nixon. And that's a fact. That's a stone cold fact. And he was referring to the American Jew, not the Israeli Jew. And there's a huge difference. Sorry.
And you know, that is so true. The real problem in Israel is the American Jew.
So,
the
real problem here is the American Jew. The leftist American Jews. They're the biggest.
No, but he's referring in Israel too.
Yeah, the biggest threat.
Look, I got friends. I got friends, and this really pisses me off. They support their children going to Israel, starting kibbutzes, and joining the IDF. Any American that joins the IDF should first be a member of the U.S. military. They say, F America and your military, I'm going to the IDF. I'm going to join the IDF.
Well, Charles, I may disagree with you on that one. You can do both.
No,
You can be
well,
both.
I don't think you're either American or you're not. And and,
Oh.
and 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 these people have used us and brought us into. We have no business
Problem
being in the.
is, Charles,
We have no business being in the Middle East.
I
We
understand
have
what you're
no business.
saying.
We have no business being in the Middle
I
East.
understand what you're
You know,
saying, but the fact is, our military, through no fault of the servicemen, either fuck up on a continual basis. We haven't won one war,
that's
since
not true. We won
World War
Vietnam.
II.
That's not
Okay,
true, Larry. We
and
won
number
Vietnam. We
two,
never lost the battle of
not
Vietnam.
because of our servicemen, but they're being sent into wars for political
But you just
purposes.
said that our people screw up. That's not true.
No,
We
they're
took
being caused to screw up.
we took Afghanistan. We took Vietnam. We took Iraq. And we did it all with one hand tied behind
Wasn't
our
the
back.
fault of the servicemen. They've been sacrificed. I represent a number
So
of
what? That's what we
families.
do. That's what
But
we do.
at least the Israeli military does something that is positive. Okay, I'm not saying that all the
We're not
killing of
talking
Gaza
about
is
what
good.
they do. I'm talking about Americans who refuse to serve in the U.S. military, going to serve in Israel's military.
Well, if they
Your
refuse to
ass
serve,
over there.
if they refuse to serve in the military, I agree with you.
And it's not about refusing. It's what they do. I got doctors and lawyers and friends who their children are serving in the IDF. Their children are going over there building those kibbutzes. They're settlers, and you have the same old thing. They go over there. They settle in places that have been given to the Palestinians. Then you have this conflict, and then we want to do the old cavalry to the rescue routine. Oh, the settlers got killed by the Indians, so we gotta go in there and save the settlers and kill the Indians. That's the same thing that's happened in that area for a very, very long time.
This is where
people need to honor.
Charles, this is where I'll have to humbly disagree with you on
Okay.
this one, and that's okay. We're allowed to disagree. First of all, most if you decide you want to move to America, we don't have a draft here. So if we had a draft here and you
Anymore.
decided, what I'm saying, we don't have a draft here right now.
Yeah.
So if you were to move to America and there was a draft, and you would be forced to serve. So if you move to Israel and gain citizenship, you are automatically have to go into the military. That is
But
one
these
of the
people aren't the ones I'm talking about. I'm talking about American citizens like you
no,
and
no.
I.
I'm saying American citizens that decide to get Israeli citizenship automatically have to serve 3 years in the military. They are that's part of the Israel. That's part.
It's
What?
not part of being a citizen.
That's part of citizenship. And when we refer
And
to
I
the
don't see
Middle
anything
East,
wrong with that. I don't see anything wrong with that. But what I do, the problem that I have is that, and I'm a veteran. If you're gonna serve anyone's country, you need to serve your own country first. So what they said to us is, well, I'll put America on hold, and I'll go over here. Like, I like the idea. I like how they fight. So don't get this wrong. Don't get this twisted. I like the fact that they defend themselves. I think that they should go in. I think they should take Hamas out. I don't care how many civilians are caught up in this thing, because the civilians have said, we're going to support Hamas. If you don't want to be bombed, if you don't want to be killed, then you better kick Hamas out. That's how I feel. Okay, so don't say that. Think that.
Oh, it got a little
confusing.
No, it got a little confusing the way you said it. So
let me weigh in here. Okay. Here's the thing: is that it is in America's best interest to eliminate Hamas, and to eliminate Iran, and to eliminate the Houthis, and to eliminate everyone in and around there that is radical. Okay, so the fact that an American may volunteer, a Jewish American, to assist the IDF is not contrary to being an American, particularly when you have morons, running our military. And they've been doing that for a very long time. Lloyd Austin is more concerned about homosexuality, lesbianism, and transgenderism than fighting a war. Okay, so our servicemen have been abused. They've been sent into battle without any plan to win. And all we've done, for the most part, in the wars in recent history, was to sacrifice our brave men and women. Think about the families who had their kids go to Iraq and Afghanistan and die for that, only to have Biden pull out and allow Americans to remain there, as well as our allies, the people that died for nothing. The fact that we turned Iraq into greater Iran, an outrage. And think of those families that lost loved ones, that believed in this country, that sent their men and women there. So those Americans are saying, we're going over there and saying, well, okay, I'm proud to be an American, but I also want to help the IDF out to eliminate this because this helps the United States. I don't think there's anything wrong in that. Got it?
No, but I understand what Charles is saying. Listen, I really do. But you got to understand, Charles. I'm not. It is not a good time to be a Jew in America right now, and it's especially when you have family members that wear yarmulkes. They are literally have become made moving targets. And I don't say that lightly. I'm not one of those people that when I failed my driver's license test, I said the guy was a Nazi. Okay, I don't. I don't.
Did you
I
fail your
don't.
driver's test?
Yeah, because I stupidly the Verrazano Bridge. I passed the toll booth. I didn't realize. Anyways. Yeah, I failed. And but everybody always says don't take it in Staten Island. But I wanted to get it earlier. My bigger point being is, Charles, this is one of the most dangerous times I could say in my lifetime of being a Jew in America. And I can't, and the Democrat Party has done nothing but, and I have to say the same thing for the Black community is at a crossroads in this country right now, and bigger than one I've seen in my lifetime, because you could choose one way with Trump, who believes in the American dream for all Americans and who doesn't see color, who just sees potential. And we have the other party that has basically rigged this. You ever see A Bronx Tale?
Mhm.
It's one of my favorite movies. Remember that scene where Chaz Palminteri says, "You never pay somebody too much because then they won't need you. You never pay somebody too little because then they won't want you." Or whatever. Then you pay somebody just enough. So, and that's to me the welfare system in America. You pay people just enough that they need you, they don't want to leave you. But Trump doesn't see it like that. He doesn't see it like that for the Black community, for the female, for any community. I hate even
Well,
talking about community.
when you look at this, I'm in Florida now, so I'm not in a major area, major metropolitan area. And I look at, but my daughter went to school at NYU. And my godson went to school. They went to school together up through high school, from elementary school or preschool up through high school, my godson and my daughter. And so my godson is a big muckety-muck attorney in Hollywood. And I asked him, I said, hey, man, how do you feel about these attacks on, because a lot of Jews had gone to their schools, throughout the years. They'd had Jewish holidays, the whole 9 yards. He said, well, to tell you the truth, I don't feel any kind of way. They never invited me to any of their bat mitzvahs or their parties, or he said they treated us like outsiders. He said, because he said, I have a lot of friends, and his friends happen to be white. So they're not Jewish. I said, so do you have any Jewish friends? He said, no, they treated me bad. So I said to my daughter, who's very friendly, outgoing, she's got all kind of friends, and she's very clear that she has all kind of friends. She doesn't have Black friends, she doesn't have white friends, she has friends. And she's always been that way. So I was very clear. I asked her the same thing. And the parents, the Jewish parents, treated me bad. And I had to set several of them straight that I'm not here on welfare. I pay just as much money as you do. I mean, they were horrible.
You're referring, by the way, and what you're referring to, though, is also the very liberal part of the Jewish community.
That may be true. That may be true. I'm just telling you.
No, but it's a very important perspective, at least from my part, because
and then when I grew, as growing up as a boy in Detroit was interesting, because I remember there was this guy. He owned a grocery store. He's really a nice man. My parents loved him. Everybody in the neighborhood loved this guy. He was a good guy. And I was sitting down eating an apple. He gave me an apple. I was sitting down eating an apple and listening to him and these other guys talk. And he said to me something like, "Charles, I'm not a white man." He said, "People call me white. I'm not a white man. I'm a Jew." And I was like, I'm a young guy. I'm a kid. I'm like 7, 8 years old. I'm trying to
He always
process.
jokes to me about that. Yeah.
And he says, "I'm a Jew. I'm a Jew." I'm like, okay. And in those days, Jew was actually on our, when you took a test, the category of Jewish actually on the record, on the thing when you fill it out. And they disappeared. So Jewish people became white, supposedly, and kind of moved on. But it's been an interesting phenomenon. Jewish people in this country, Black people in this country, because this whole racial identity, the African American and Black. Most Black Americans want to be called Black, not African Americans. It's an insult. Jesse Jackson started that mess in 1986. And nobody asked Jesse to try to rename us, but he did, and the media ran with it. I'm a Black American. I am not an African American.
Like Morgan Freeman says.
Well, not only Morgan, but you have Denzel Washington. He says the same thing. You have Smokey Robinson. I mean, any Black person with an iota of sense knows that I don't remember any African country saying, "Hey, come over here. We have passports and citizenship for you. Just come on in." Not one. In the last 5 years, though, I think Ghana has started offering Black Americans a passport. But none of these African countries have opened their doors to accept Black Americans, and I don't think we should open our doors to accept them. In fact, I get there's a real schism between Africans and Black Americans in this country. That's a whole nother thing.
Isn't there one also between Jamaicans?
Oh, no question.
I think it's really important to talk about that, because there's a lot of people that are not, when I bring this up to people, they look at me. You can't have conversations in this country. You can't say to somebody. So I brought up this point that Black Jamaicans look down oftentimes on other Blacks. And I was referring to this with Kamala Harris.
And like Colin Powell. What did Colin Powell do once he got, "I'm a Bayesian American"? What? You were born in Brooklyn. Eric Holder, "I'm a Bayesian American." No, you were born in Brooklyn. Okay.
Right.
So my father, Eric Holder, my father is a Bayesian and I'm a Bayesian American. You were born in Brooklyn, Negro.
What do you mean by Bayesian? What is that? He's beige?
The Bermuda.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Larry, it's sort of like people from Portugal look down on the rest of people that speak Spanish. It's this one massive class
system. On the ground level, I remember where Judicial Watch's office was. It's still in the same area, even though I'm no longer there, even though I was the founder. And I would get a cab down at the Holiday Inn when I'd have to go somewhere, and it would be a fight between the African cab drivers and the so-called American Blacks. Okay, they hated each other, essentially. It's true. Okay, and because the Africans look down on the American Black. Okay.
Well, the difference is, Larry, now those African cab drivers own cab companies. They're no longer driving for a cab company. They have their own companies in DC. So, and I always found that interesting. They have done very well.
Yeah, and they have Somalis working for them, and the Somalis have to work really hard because many of them have 4 wives, sometimes not in this country.
No, but it is sort of amazing though how we've regressed, and it's horrifically sad. And I encourage everybody, because there's a lot of people that haven't watched, whether it be the Jeffersons or whether it be All in the Family. And when you watch the Jeffersons, that show would not be allowed. I hate when people say that what show wouldn't be allowed on television today. That show would not be allowed to be. Have you watched it recently, Charles?
I love the Jeffersons.
When was the last time you saw it?
I saw an episode about maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Okay, you would not allow to be use the N-word.
That was the theme of the Democratic National
Convention. I use the N-word all the time.
Guys,
They use
Sorry.
the N-word all the time.
that was the theme
You
of
know,
the
that's why I use
Democratic
the,
National
that's why I use
Convention.
the F word. I'm saying if they can use the N-word, I can use the F word.
I said on TV, and I'm saying on TV, we've regressed. We really have regressed. I
No
mean, I
question.
grew up, what?
No question.
I mean, I grew up and I grew up in Brooklyn. I'm not going to say I didn't, like I said, I'm not going to say you don't see things, you don't hear things, but we grew up when television was, to me, it seemed way more integrated than it does now. When you had the NBA, listen, we've regressed,
People are too
and I think
sensitive
we
now.
were
They're too
sorry.
sensitive. They're too sensitive. And that theme of the Jeffersons, I want my piece of the pie, right? That was the theme of the Democratic National Convention. It's just the question is who's going to pay for the piece of the pie? That's it. Okay. I want my piece of the pie. So in every respect, whether you're black, whether you're Jewish, whether you're homosexual, whether you're transgender, I want my piece of the pie.
I saw an interesting story in the paper a couple of days ago. So in New York, these two guys were at Steak and Shake, and they were busting slobs in line. So the employee said, "Hey, you can't kiss in here. You can't kiss in here. We don't play that. You can't, their children and their families in here." And this guy, was like, "Ah," and they went back to kissing. And the employees came out and beat both the Jews up
Hey, you want to see how things changed?
and threw them out of the restaurant. And I'm like, yes.
Do you remember the scene from Bruno? It was otherwise a disgusting movie, but there's one really funny scene in there, in my opinion. That's when Bruno goes to a talk show and he comes out with a black child, right? And so the black women in the audience say, "Why do you have a black child?" And he says, "To be successful in Hollywood, you have to have a black child." Okay. And then they say, "Well, how did you get your black child?" "I traded my iPad for him." And then they say, "Well, what did you name your black child?" And he says, "A traditional African name." They said, "What's that?" "OJ." So here's the point. Here's the point. You go back and he comes out and he's a homosexual. And, he says it's really bad to raise a child without a parent. And I'm looking for a man. And everybody in the audience boos at that point. Okay. Because in those days, gay marriage was not the norm. It was not.
It's still not the norm.
Well, it shouldn't be the norm, but it's accepted today.
But it's not accepted today.
Not accepted by me, not accepted by you, but it's accepted by a lot of people, including
I constantly put those people in their place.
Yeah,
because at the end of the day, we had a law called DOMA, the Defense of Marriage Act.
Okay.
That said, man, go ahead.
The point is, if you look at this clip, and it's very funny, it shows you how things have changed so quickly. I mean, this Bruno maybe is 15.
Well, they've changed for somebody, for some people. They haven't changed for others. I don't change. And I don't intend to change.
I don't change either.
This whole homosexual thing. Hey, I don't care what you do in your bedroom, your bathroom. That's your business. But if you're acting like a decent human being, then you don't need protection. We were just talking about Jews with yarmulkes being targets, and he's absolutely right. And I feel sorry for those people because they haven't done anything to anybody. They haven't hurt anybody. They're just trying to live their life. They're going to temple. They're going to what do you call it? What the dinner they have on Friday starts with an S.
Sabbath.
Seder.
Shabbat.
Shabbat. I love going to those. I love being invited to those, by the way. But it's a great food. Okay.
Nobody can call Charles anti-Semitic because his favorite women are Jewish women.
Hey, don't put that out here. Okay.
You know what though? I just want to say something. You know what, Charles? Everything we're talking about is at the end of the day, to me, is everything should be allowed to be talked about. And that's what the left has done in this country, is they've made it not okay. I'm not saying for us.
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying for so many people that don't, and so many people don't have the courage. And that's why I was referring to the shy voters and why you can't get an accurate count, because people are scared to say things out loud.
They are. They really are.
Ben Stein taught me debate is the essence of America. And that is what we've lost.
But
The-
you know, you're right. I mean, you go to Europe, you go to a pub in London. What are they talking about? Politics and women. You know, you go to a cafe in Paris. What are they talking about? Politics and women. You go to a bistro in Italy. Politics and women. And here, I don't talk politics. This is America. The hell you mean you don't talk politics?
We've been going on for an hour, so let's kind of encapsulate this. I think what we're all trying to say is that this country
is if Trump doesn't win, we're not having these conversations anymore.
That may be, but what we're also trying to say is this country has become so fractured. Every group has been pitted against every other group, and the Democrats have been behind it. And that was basically the theme of the Democratic National Convention: is pit one group against another and divide and conquer, the old story. And if the Democrats do win, and again, I don't advocate who to vote for, but people can figure it out as the head of a nonprofit. But if they do win, the country's gone. It's over, basically. And to anybody that's going to object to the dictatorship, which will follow, we're already in a virtual dictatorship. The only alternative will be to go to the streets, and we don't want to see that, of course. But I think that's where we're probably headed, because they're taking control. And my last thought, and you guys can weigh in, I've got some stuff I've got to do in my law practice. But my last thought is that what Ayn Rand wrote about, I've said this many times this week, in Atlas Shrugged, has come to pass. And she wrote about it in 1958, when communism was on the rise, but now it's actually here big time. We're having what was advocated at Democratic National Committee were, price controls, committees that control the economy, committees that'll control what you can say, committees that control everything else, but yet they wrapped it in a veneer of freedom, and it was such bullshit. Excuse the French again, bullshit. But it was presented in a way that made it appealing to the American who really doesn't bother to educate themselves, number one. Number two, doesn't really want to do anything, that's just sitting on the couch, like some family members I have, drinking, watching Fox News and saying that's enough. Not my immediate family, I might add. And others, frankly, who just are out to lunch. And most of our population today, frankly, is on one type of drug or another. They're drugged out, particularly the young people in this country. They're on mushrooms, ecstasy, carotene, psychedelics, etc. Basically, the country, in terms of its underpinning, is very susceptible to these fraudsters that want to continue and up the ante in taking control of our lives and making us subjected to a Atlas Shrugged type total government control. That's my last statement. It's my final word today. And we will fight that. And Larry Klayman will fight that. And you guys will fight that. But we have to get other people out there. We have to be as persuasive in a positive way as Kamala Harris is, and the bunch of leftists and perverts that are behind her.
And all I'll say is, don't believe what you're saying. It's smoke and mirrors. This is like a football team that goes 8-0 and didn't play anybody and has a really weak offensive line. Don't believe the numbers, don't believe the polls, and don't listen to the pundits. They're not right on this one. I am. And I truly believe Donald Trump will win in a landslide. And I just wanted to end on one quick funny story. This actually happened to a friend of mine last night. He was at the Nova exhibit. And for people not familiar with the Nova Music Festival, where all those people were slaughtered, and they have an exhibit right now in Los Angeles where they actually have cars, and it's really very and Richie Torres was there, the congressman from New York, who's gay and a Zionist. And my friend walked up to him and said, "Why aren't you at the DNC?" And he said, "This is more important to me." And I said to my friend, "That's a politician's way of saying the DNC didn't want a black gay Zionist at the convention."
Well, that's true. But also, let me just add and then we'll let Charles conclude this thing. But I do want people to go to freedomwatchusa.org and contribute to our cause with tax-deductible contributions. We really need it badly. The Republicans have siphoned away a lot of campaign contribution with their campaign contributions to nonprofits such as Freedom Watch. But I don't want anyone to think, as much as we all may like Donald Trump and what he stands for, there's no political messiah. We must do it for ourselves. And so don't just rock back and say, oh, I'm going to wait for Donald Trump to be elected. I don't have to do anything. Because even if he wins, he's only there for 4 years. And he's not perfect, believe me. He's the best we've got, but he's not perfect. Go ahead, Charles.
Well, I just wanted to say I enjoyed this this discussion today. Very open, candid discussion. We covered a lot of topics, brushed over a lot of things that need to be said. We need to spend more time than going in depth on some of these issues, because the real issues are pocketbook issues. And what do I mean by that? I mean, when I get up from here and go to the grocery store, go to Costco, 3 steaks that cost me $35 4 years ago cost me $75 to $85 today. When I go to the same gas pumps, at one point the gas was $6 a gallon. When under Donald Trump 4 years ago was under $2. If the gas rolls up to $2 a gallon, I got upset. Now, if it gets anywhere near 3, I'm happy. You know, we can't settle. We can't forget what these people have done to our economy. We can't let them get away with lying. We can't get away with what they're doing on the world stage. We can't let them buffalo Israel into the kind of wishy-washy military junkets that they put our military in, and compromise our military and our governments. We need to let Israel do its thing, because they know what they're doing. They're dealing with some real hardcore terrorists, and wherever you stand on that issue, to me, it's all about self-defense. I hope that they have a ceasefire, and I hope Hamas has the courage to come out from behind the skirts they're hiding behind and get their just due, which is to be buried or burned or whatever the hell they do with each other when they die. But they don't need to be here on Earth. That's about all I have to say about this. And those poor people in Chicago, as you know, Larry, I've talked about the violence in Chicago since 2007. I've talked about how kids are shot going to school. They're not in any drug trade. They're just targets being shot at going to school. No one's done anything about that. Kamala Harris talked about what she's going to do. She hasn't done anything. She doesn't intend to do anything. Democrats don't care. Donald Trump was the only president and the only person that offered to come to the urban cities, to those areas that are like third world countries and like war zones, and clean them up. He's the only one. And he was rejected by Democrats. And they talk about him rejecting the immigration bill. Let's talk about the Democrats rejecting his attempt to come into the Black communities and clean those communities up so that you're not living in a war zone because of your zip code.
Well, that immigration bill was a sham, and that's another way Republicans are not dressing it. It did not solve the problem. And why are they coming out and explaining that it was still going to let in 5,000 illegal immigrants a day? Why can't they say that? And
by the way, Charles, I also want to say there's 2 things important. I just want to say this. What people also forget is every weekend when we witness the inner city people just waste the shootings, people forget to mention that if this was 20 years ago or 30 years ago, it would be 40 dead Black people a weekend. It wouldn't be 40 shot. Because of our trauma units, people are getting are able to, their lives are being saved. Some of them, thank God. But the pox that it is on our country that we allow this to go on is a shame. And when we started the show, that nobody brought up the fact that they brought in Planned Parenthood into the inner city of Chicago is one of the most vile and despicable things I've ever seen in my life, when we know that Margaret Sanger, whole goal was to annihilate the Black population, and they decided to, and started Planned Parenthood, and they decided to allow her at Planned Parenthood to do this in Chicago, is so beyond the scope of anything
Let's-
sane.
Let's conclude right now. You made a very good point. My two good friends here, we had a good exchange of views. You're both extremely intelligent. You're both well-intentioned. And it's really great that we can have an exchange of candid views between us. And we'll be back next week with another edition of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman, and we'll have our good friends back. If you guys want to join me again next week at some point, okay, we'll do it. And I thank you all. And please go to freedomwatchusa.org, join our Justice League, contribute to our cause with tax-deductible contributions. We need it. God bless you. Thank you for your support all these years. And remember, the Father and Son will only help us if we help ourselves. In Judah's case, God will only help us if we help ourselves. And so thank you all. Bye.